Okay, so you're up and printing now. You run your first print, and then you get this. Let's get into part 3 of Intro to 3D Printing. Hey everyone, Jason here at 3D Matter Makers, and this week we're going to be going through some basic printing issues and how to troubleshoot the most common problems. But first, if you like these videos and have not yet subscribed to the channel, please click the subscribe button. Clicks are free and everybody wins. So you've got your 3D printer and you're all set up to print. You hit print and either things are turning out like crap or your printer's just not working at all. I know how frustrating this can be, and a lot of times you're just not sure where to start looking. Well, we're going to try and cover the most common issues that you might run into and how to fix them. So let's start with your printer's just flat out not working right. Now this can be anything from the axes not moving, to filament not flowing out, to just your printer making some really strange sounds. Now one of the first things that you should do when you turn on your printer for the first time is do what's called an auto home. It's commonly found in the prepare menu of your control panel on your printer, and it just zeroes out all the axes to their home position. For most printers, the home position is going to be in the front left-hand corner of your build plate, but some printers are going to be in the center of your build plate. Now if you hit auto home and one or more of the axes don't move, or your printer is reaching its furthest it can go and the gears are just grinding away, then the first thing to check is your limit switches. Make sure they're plugged in, that each one is connected to the correct axis. And make sure they're not positioned incorrectly also, like on the Z being too low or too high. And if you're having the grinding problem, a good idea is to set your print head to the middle, or you move your Z axis up manually, and then press the switch before it gets to the end to see if the switch is bad. If it won't stop, just unplug or turn off your printer before it reaches the end. That way it doesn't tear your gears apart. The other thing to check is to make sure that connections are good on your actual stepper motors themselves. Make sure that everything's plugged in and again connected to the right axis. Limit switches you can buy individually, and they're really inexpensive and super easy to install. Another thing you can check is the tension on your belts. They need to be snugly tight, but not too tight and certainly not too loose. Keep in mind that you should check these every once in a while, as they do slightly stretch over time, especially after the first week or two of using a brand new printer. If you're having trouble on the Z axis, then you might want to check your lead or ball screw rod and the nut. The nut has screws holding it in place, and you don't want to over tighten these or it will bind up on the Z rod. Also check your lead screw for dirt or debris, and occasionally add some of the appropriate lubricant to the rod. So you hit auto home and everything's going to its home position properly. You've leveled your bed and you hit print, but there's no filament coming out now. Or you might even hear your extruder making this loud clicking and popping sound. First, let's make sure that your hot end is actually getting hot. Using the prepare menu, turn on the hot end using the preheat PLA or preheat hot end setting. You can see the temperature of your hot end on your LCD screen. And if it's not heating up or it has some sort of error displaying, then you should first check your connections. There'll be a connector for both the heater cartridge and the heater thermistor. First, make sure they're plugged into the board correctly. If all looks good, then you can check the hot end, and don't check these parts hot. Now if you don't see any issues with any of the connections and you're sure that everything's plugged in correctly, then you could possibly have a firmware or actually a board issue. And you can go to the Facebook user group for your printer and they can try and help you out there. You can also get in contact with the manufacturer of the printer or even the reseller that sold it to you. So now you have filament flowing out of the hot end, but it seems to be coming out really thin, or what we call under extruded. There might even be a clicking sound coming from your extruder motor as it's feeding the filament through. In this case, there's a good chance that you have a partially clogged nozzle. And it doesn't take much, just a little speck of dust in the nozzle's all it takes. Another symptom of a partially clogged nozzle is the filament comes out and it's actually curling back up towards the nozzle. You can preheat your hot end and pull the lever on the extruder and try manually pushing the filament through and see if you can push any particulates through the nozzle. But if that doesn't work, you're going to have to do what's called a cold pull or an atomic pull. Preheat your hot end to say 240 if you're using PLA, and push the filament by hand until it's coming out of the nozzle. Turn the hot end off using the cool down function under the prepare menu, and once your hot end gets to around 100 to 110 degrees, quickly pull the filament out. Now you might have to repeat this process multiple times until you're getting the correct results, but what you'll want is for the end of the filament to come out with a nice clean even plug shape. You can remove the Bowden tubing from the hot end to make this a little easier so you don't have to pull through the tubing and the extruder. You can also check the extruder assembly to see if you need to adjust the tension on the spring that exerts the force on the extruder gear that feeds the filament through. So now you're sure that everything's working correctly mechanically on your printer, your nozzle is clear, you hit the print button, and your first layer is coming out like crap. First thing to check your bed leveling again. You need to at least check all four corners and the middle of your print bed using a piece of paper. Now if you have all four corners at the perfect level, but you notice that the middle is extremely low or extremely high, then you're going to need to get a different print surface. Glass is the easiest and cheapest to go with, and it's my personal favorite. It has a good thickness that will not bow, and I love the print surface quality that you get with a glass layer. Plus it's super easy to remove prints when it cools down. If you're having trouble getting your print to stick down, then your nozzle may be set too high, or your print surface may have some residue on it preventing the print from sticking. You can also try using a glue stick or Aquanet hairspray or even blue painter's tape. Now if you notice a gap between your lines of filament when there shouldn't be, then you're probably under extruding, so not enough filaments coming out. Again, check your nozzle. But another thing is that your extruder motor may not be calibrated properly. There are some really great tutorials out there on how to calibrate your extruder assembly properly, and I'll post a link in the description down below to one of those articles. Lastly, and the most simple fix, is to go into your slicer and change your extrusion multiplier. You can increase it by 5% increments or so and see if you can correct the issue that way. Pro tip here, to help ensure that you have a really solid first layer, change your first layer settings in your slicer. Try changing your first layer height to 150% or less and your first layer width to 125% or less, and your first layer speed to say around 35%. Another issue that you may see is a gap between your infill and the actual wall or perimeter of your print. Once again, check your nozzle. But another thing is you can also check your infill overlap or outline overlap in your slicer under the infill settings. This is how much the infill is printing into the actual perimeter or wall of your print. And 20 to 30% is usually a good range to go off of, but keep below 50%. You can also bump your infill extrusion width to 125% or so. Another problem may be that you're just not printing hot enough, so you can try increasing your print temperature by 5-degree increments and see if that helps. And lastly, you can just slow down your print speed. Sometimes you're just printing too fast. Now if you notice your infill looks stringy or weak, one of the things you can do is reduce the print speed so that the hot end has more time to lay down the infill. Alternatively, you can also try turning the temperature up a little bit and even try changing the pattern of the infill that you're using. Now if your layers and walls are not lining up evenly and are generally looking like crap, then I would check your belts again and your rod and make sure that everything is mechanically sound on your printer. You can also try slowing the print speed down again to see if that makes any improvement. And if your layers are just simply not adhering to each other or they're splitting apart really easily, then try bumping your print temperature up higher. You can also verify that your layer height is not set too high. If you're printing with a 0.4mm nozzle, then you shouldn't print with a layer height any higher than 0.3 millimeters, with 0.2 millimeter being kind of the ideal height. Now the last thing I want to mention is the use of rafts. And what a raft is a layer that goes underneath your print that gives it stability while it's printing that you can just peel right off when your print is done. And for some prints, it's just virtually impossible to print without a raft, especially if you have a large print that has a small contact area on the print bed. So using a raft is not cheating, nor is it evil. It's smart printing. The catch is just getting your settings configured correctly so that they're easy to use. I personally set my top and bottom layers to 2 or 3, set my raft to offset from part to around 3 millimeters or so, set the separation distance to about 0.14 millimeters, the top infill at 100%, and the above raft speed to 30%. Doing this gives me great bed adhesion, and the rafts just peel away like butter once I'm done printing. So that's all for this episode. I'm going to put a couple of links down below in the description. One is to all3dp.com and one is to simplify3d.com to their troubleshooting guides. These are invaluable resources to have on hand, and if you bookmark these and go to these, you'll be able to solve almost all of your printing problems that you run into. Now, if you're looking to buy a new 3D printer, I do have some links down below to some of my favorite 3D printers, and of course those do help the channel out. Again, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you have not done so yet, and feel free to leave comments down below. Remember, it doesn't matter what you're making as long as you're making matter. I'm Jason, and I'll catch y'all next time.